I love doing shows like this because I get to speak to people who I've been watching for so long and so many great movies and doing such a great job of doing it. And he's part of a new action-packed disaster thriller that stars Gerard Butler called Greenland, available on demand everywhere today. The actor Scott Glenn here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on here on this show. What was your first gig? Scott? Walk me through that. Talking about origins and how you get started.
My first gig was understudying an off-Broadway play, one of the many redos of Zeus Story, Edward Albee. And I never went on stage. I understudied the part, and I understudied both parts, a two-character play, excuse me, and neither of them ever got sick, so I never went on stage. The first job that people would probably either might or might not know is the first film I did, which was called The Baby Maker, directed by Jim Bridges, who a few years later directed me in Urban Cowboy, which kind of gave me my life.
But before all that, too, Apocalypse Now, correct, with Francis Ford Coppola. Is it true that you saved his life? Is that a fact, Scott Glenn?
Well, kind of.
Ish,
yeah. We got hit. I got to the Philippines to play a small part in Apocalypse, and 2 days after I got there, we were hit with the worst typhoon to have hit the Philippines since 1932. It was called Typhoon Didang. And about 2 or 3 days later, the way a force majeure works is you can't just say, "Oh, we've been trashed by a typhoon and we can't continue, so you got to give us your money." What happens is an insurance adjuster has to show up and see that, in fact, you're trying to shoot but can't. So the day that they were going to do that was a scene that was going to be it was like a little brook that had turned into a whitewater because of the typhoon. And Francis and the insurance adjuster and the DP, like 4 or 5 guys, got in this boat to go out onto this whitewater. And they tied a rope on the back of the boat to, I guess their idea was to pull the boat back to shore if the water was too rough. And I saw what they were doing. I was maybe 50 yards away. I saw what they were doing and realized that the stream would take the boat right downstream. The rope would pull the back of the boat down. The boat would sink, and they would be stuck swimming or drowning or doing whatever you do in whitewater.
Right.
So when they let the boat go, I was fairly recently out of the Marine Corps, and I always had a knife on me. So I saw it happen, and I just instinctively pulled out the knife and ran and cut the rope. And, later on that night, Francis said, "You saved my life." And, whether I did or not, I don't know. It was just kind of an instinctive move. I cut a piece of rope, is all I did.
Okay. So you're saying Colonel Kurtz wasn't the only one to maybe almost go up the river on that movie, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Did you come across Brando at any point, or you just never did?
I did indeed. Francis, because of that event, I kind of helped out during the getting ourselves together after the typhoon. Francis said, I'm a really great writer, and I owe you, so let me write you a better part than you came here to do. Just think of something you'd like to do, and we'll sit down and we'll knock it off over the next 2 or 3 days. And I said, I want to be in the end of the movie. And he said, "Scott, I'm sorry, that's the only part of the film I can't. It's completely cast." He said, you could play Captain Colby, the guy that goes up the river ahead of Marty Sheen, and you might have like 1 or 2 lines, but essentially you'll be like a glorified extra. But if you want to do it, I'm good to my word. And I said, yeah, I do. Because I realized at that point, I was so new to acting, and it's probably true of any kind of live, and it's probably true of what you do. You don't learn that stuff in the school or from books or anything. It's an apprenticeship, and I wanted to be around Marlon Brando and Dennis Hopper and just watch them work. So, yeah, I did. I hung out with Marlon a lot and learned a lot.
What, you got a good story? It's safe for work, or what do you think? Scott, you got anything for Marlon?
I've got a lot of stories, but you know, what I learned from Marlon was there are no rules. Sometimes he would make an expression in a mirror, freeze it, and say to Francis, "Okay, start shooting." And other times he would come to the set and wouldn't want to even see the script. Would just want to turn it all loose and improv it. There's a scene in the film that never made it to any of the many final cuts of that film where I killed Dennis Hopper. And I was trying to figure out different ways of doing it. And Marlon came over to me and he said, "Scott, just remember this. Just because they call it acting doesn't mean you have to act. Why don't you just drop the reins a few times and see where the horse takes you?" And he was a pretty amazing guy. Every dime he made on that movie, he spent rescuing a village that had been trashed by the typhoon. You know, and then wouldn't let publicity say anything about it. So he was a pretty interesting guy.
Scott Glenn here on the Rich Eisen Show. For The Right Stuff, did you meet Alan Shepard? Did you?
No, intentionally I did not.
Huh?
Because it's my experience that when somebody knows you're going to explode their image onto a screen the size of a 4-story building, even without intending to, they're going to edit themselves. I never did this, and I don't believe this story, and this is what I did do. So, no, I wanted to see as much background stuff. By that I mean home movies, talk to people that knew him, get as much information on Alan Shepard as possible. But I didn't really want to talk to him. I realized that in making that movie, there were going to be two people playing the part because they were going to cut back and forth between us, you know, the cast of The Right Stuff, and newsreel footage. So the exterior of Shepard, I knew I had to have down. The hardest part for me doing that part was being right-handed, because I'm very left-handed. But anyway, when the film was over, he gave me the best review I think I've ever had. My favorite, anyway.
What's that?
He sent a letter. He sent a letter to Phil Kaufman. He said, "Show this to Scott Glenn." In the letter, he says, "Mr. Glenn, I just watched you play me. You got it almost perfect. There's only one thing you missed, and that is you ain't anywhere near as good looking as I am."
Is that right?
Which was perfect. I loved it. I mean, he didn't disappoint. He was Alan Shepard all the way through.
Oh, my gosh. Scott Glenn here on the Rich Eisen Show. I literally could talk to you about your movies all day. Let's move on to The Hunt for Red October. What was it like on the set there with Connery and everyone else? What was it like there for you on that one?
Well, it was the research for that film was, for me, a lot of fun, and developed a relationship with. I got to go out on a fast attack sub doing war games. That was the captain of the sub was at the time Captain Tom Fargo, who later became Admiral of the Pacific, and so I had that phenomenal experience. And while we were out on the boat, I watched the way that he dealt with his crew, and decided rather than, you know, use whatever limited amount of talent I have, I should just steal the whole performance from him because he was perfect, which I did. Sean had a reputation of being a rough guy, and some people thought he was hard to work with. I thought I loved him, and at the end of that film, when we played chicken with a Russian attack sub.
Yes.
That scene was Sean's scene. He comes back from his shootout in the engine room, takes over the sub, and does that scene. And when we were ready to shoot it, he said, "No, this is Scott's scene." And the director and the producers were on the set at the time. They said, "No, it's why are you saying that?" And Sean said, "I was in the Royal Navy. You don't give command of your vessel to someone else of equal rank and get to take it back." And he said, so Scott does this scene. And I was amazed.
Huh. No kidding. So that's how that came about. And for you as a Marine, that had to be, to be around that world had to be something for you that you were fascinated into, all sorts of stuff like that, Scott.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I
mean, it's funny. I was, am, and will be past the grave, as all Marines are.
Indeed.
A Marine, but enlisted, and I've only played officers, which I never was, nor did I ever want to be, to tell you the truth.
Well, again, I guess that's what Brando said. It's just because it's acting, you could just drop the reins a little bit and see how it goes. I got Scott Glenn here on the Rich Eisen Show. Before we get to Greenland, and I want to talk to you about a couple other movies, and then maybe a little bit of sports before I let you go on your day here. When you get the script for Silence of the Lambs, did you have any idea what it would be, what it would look like, how it would actually hit the screen, and what was your thoughts when you get a script from Jonathan Demme for that?
I'll tell you the truth. I don't know, because it was a really well written script, but for whatever reason, I read it and just didn't see it. And through the script across the room, it bounced off the wall. And my wife, who's a great artist, she's a potter. She walked in and she said, "What's that?" And I said, "No, that's something that." She said, "Well, who's going to direct it?" I said, "Jonathan Demme." And Carol said, "You better read this again. Jonathan's a good friend of ours. He's a great director. Read it again." So I did. She was right. I was wrong. But I didn't have I don't think any of us had any sense that the film was going to be as successful, like commercially, as it was. It was the second highest grossing film of the year, the highest being Home Alone. And I think that kind of in a good way, blindsided us all, because there's so much dialogue that usually a film like that does well where people speak English, but doesn't do well in when it travels overseas.
Right.
And it was like number one film in Japan, number one and looking back on it, part of it is brilliant acting, not on my part, but on Jodie Foster's and Anthony Hopkins. But I think also one of the things that made that film work was you see a lot of films about the rites of passage of boyhood to manhood. I mean, you see that all the time. Very rarely do you see a film where the rites of passage are from girlhood to becoming a woman. And that's what happens in Silence of the Lambs.
Well, and in your character, though, there was no sexual tension between your character and Jodie Foster's, I think helped that, to be honest with you, Scott. That there was that she was a professional and that she was being brought in to figure out the mind of Hannibal Lecter, played by, did Anthony Hopkins blink in the movie? I don't think he blinked once, Scott. I don't think he blinked once.
I don't think so.
My gosh. And then one last one for you, Training Day. What did you like about that role and how you brought it, and your scenes with Denzel and Ethan Hawke were something else, man. What about that film?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
To begin with, I didn't want to. I had worked pretty much. No, not pretty much. Absolutely steadily for over 2 years without having any time off. Went from an off-Broadway play to a film in New Zealand that shot for 9 months, to a film that shot for 4 months in Germany. Coming back, stopped off in New York, had lunch with Lasse Hallström that turned out to be a whole day, and he offered me a part in Shipping News. and I had like 3 weeks off before having to start shipping news. I get home here in Idaho, where I am, and I get an offer from Warner Brothers to do Training Day, and I said, no, I can't do it. So Denzel calls me up, and he said, this is the way it works, Scott. I have to have a best friend in this film who's a white guy, who I'm going to kill at the end of the film, and the whole audience, including the black audience, has to really be pissed off at me for doing it. He said, that's you. There is nobody else.
What a compliment, Scott.
We had met each other on Courage Under Fire and become friends. And D is absolutely one of the greatest actors alive. So anyway, I said, Denzel, I want to touch, I'm going to hike up in the mountains and work out a little bit and hang out with my wife before I go to work again. And he said, no, you've got to do this. This is the way it's going to work. It's going to say Denzel Washington, Ethan Hawke in Training Day, and then right after that it's going to say starring Scott Glenn, you only work 5 days, and this is how much money you're going to make. And I said, who made that deal? And Dee said, well, I kind of did. And at the time, they thought that there was going to be a writer's strike, so the studios wanted to get as much inventory as possible. Anyway, at that point, I read the script and essentially saw 2 kind of amazing monologues, the second one of which ended in Denzel blowing me away with a shotgun. And just went and did it. He's so much fun to work with, and Ethan is as well. So, when you're doing that kind of work, it's not quite guilty enough to turn down the paycheck, but it's almost like you're just getting paid to have fun.
Oh, Scott Glenn here on the Rich Eisen Show. This is phenomenal. So tell me about Greenland, which is, again, available on demand everywhere today. Tell me about this one, Scott.
Well, I read the script. I got sent the script, read it, thought it was really well written, and knew the director. I didn't know Rick Waugh's work really well, but a little bit. And there's a character, a real-life character, whose last name is Waugh as well, Billy Waugh. And I wanted to talk to him to find out if they were related, if there was any way I could sort of crawl into, the possibility of playing this other character. Mm-hmm. And once I started talking to Rick, I was just impressed with the way he saw the film, which was the way that you deal with an impending disaster is just by taking care of the people close to you, to your family, making sure they're whole and well and can survive whatever's coming down the road. So, and he said in the part of the film that I was going to be in was what he said gave it its beating heart, and I love that. What the thing is with that movie that none of us could have figured out was that at the time we made it, none of us had ever heard the term COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Now you watch the film and you can't get it out of your head, because even though the disaster that's kind of targeted us with COVID is slow moving I don't know if you call it slow moving when you're losing 3,000 people a day, but at any rate, the resonance of what's going on in the world right now with that film just gives it a kind of punch that none of us could have predicted.
And it's available on demand everywhere today. Before I let you go, Scott, you got a sports team? Favorite sport? You got what do you got?
Born and raised Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Go Steelers.
Aha. Okay.
And the last two games have not been joyful for me. I have to tell you. I'm just. I'm hoping New Orleans kicks major ass. And
Knox.
and I think my I'm a fan, but I think that the Steelers' offense is they got kind of beat up by a COVID schedule, and when you got young receivers, I think the greatest commodity is confidence, is believing in yourself,
Right?
And hopefully they'll get on paper and playing to their best numbers. The Steelers have the best defense in the NFL, and I'll stand solidly by that.
Well, I think you're nailing it in this fact, Scott. That the Chiefs, their toughest opponent the rest of the way is the one that's directly in front of them in the New Orleans Saints, and then the Steelers have a game against the Bengals on Monday Night Football. This is your best shot to get back into that 1 seed and hold on to it the rest of the way. This week is pretty much where the rubber meets the road for 2020 in terms of that.
You're absolutely right. But my feeling is, and it's just, I mean, I don't know if there is any more, crazy dedicated fans than a Steeler fan. But my sense is if they start playing to their numbers and their ability, and they run into, and hopefully they run into KC, that Mahomes all of a sudden realizes he's in a world he's never been in. When Minka picks him off and scores on him twice, sacked him so hard he can't remember what his last name is.
The right stuff. Minka Fitzpatrick. I love it. Hey, Scott Glenn, this was I could not tell you what a big fan of yours that I am, and this was a delight, literally from start to finish. I'd love to do this again whenever you're up for it. This was great. Thank you.
Well, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. You bet. That's Scott Glenn, Greenland, available on demand everywhere today.
Jeez, that was awesome.
How great was that?
Oh, baby, that was great.
Pittsburgh's finest.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.